Okay, we are officially at 8:30 p.m. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group at Doylestown. My name's Ron. I'm an alcoholic. Whoa, enthusiasm. Good stuff. A couple quick announcements. Please, I'm going to read. We're not allowed to smoke anywhere on church property. Vitally important, not only to this church, but pretty much all churches. We about settled in? We're going to have the chairperson come up in a second. Our sister group is a Big Book study. Meets every Thursday, 7:30 p.m. at Salem UCC Church, 186 East 4th Street. We like that Big Book. We go an hour. It's pretty cool. You know, I always like to say we do it. We go an hour without a curse word and without a complaint. It's pretty cool. We read that book and we follow those directions. People get better and they live happily ever after. You're welcome to come over and be a part of that. Flyers for that are on the back table, along with flyers for this group. If you have any groups or any events or anything like that, it is important to us that we be providing that to everybody that walks through the door. So feel free to put flyers back there. We also have the Conscious Contact Speaker Group Facebook page. Not only does it keep you connected with what we do each week here, but pretty much the tri-state area of events going on. There's something. If you're bored in AA and you're not having fun, and just go in that group and look. There's something going on every day of the week, somewhere within 30 miles. You know, it's pretty cool, 50 miles maybe. So it's a really great way to seek recovery and to find out what's out there. Also, there are recordings posted. A lot of speakers that come here get posted up there when they do get there. So it's kind of good if you're ever out and you can't find a meeting to listen to that stuff there. So that's all great. We have a website also. Just you can Google it. Saturday night, 1 hour speaker meeting, Doylestown, PA, 8:30 p.m. And it pretty much comes up and it's explanatory. It has our speakers on there. Anyway, Brian's going to come up and chair this meeting. Enjoy tonight.
Hi, my name is Brian and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a 1 hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, PA. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. right here. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you do not wish to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Hi, Neil, welcome. Anthony, welcome.
Jeff.
Hi, Jeff, welcome. All right. Hi, Danielle, welcome. All right. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor others, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD Donations. If you would like a CD of any speaker, past or present, see me or Ron before or after the meeting. They are available free of charge. And now Tara is going to come up and read the preamble.
Hi, I'm Tara, I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. I've asked Brian to come up and read the AA 12 Steps of Recovery.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian, and I am an alcoholic. And these are the 12 steps of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the results of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all of our affairs. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brian. He's going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Thank you.
The 7th tradition, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I would like to pass a basket. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. This group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, big books, CDs, events and workshops, etc. There's absolutely no smoking on church property. And now if I could ask you to please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now I'd like to introduce Ron B. from the Basking Ridge Group in New Jersey. He's a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. Please welcome Ron B.
Just a typical AA meeting. Big speakers and microphones, great. I want to thank Ron for having me out here. I turned him down several times. I couldn't quite see myself making this trip and getting dressed up and all. And then I get a phone call from him about 3 weeks, no, maybe a month ago. And I saw he was on my phone again. And for some reason I picked it up. I wasn't really sure I was going to. And I pick it up, and a really good friend of our family's had sent their son out to rehab, and I thought he was in Pennsylvania. So anyway, it's Ron K. on the phone, but when I pick the phone up, it's Will. I said, Will, I thought you were in rehab. He goes, I am. I said, I thought you were like in lockdown. You don't have a phone. He goes, no, I don't have a phone, but Ron K.'s here. And I said, Ron K.? He goes, yeah, he says you've been dodging him for like a year. In fact, he says they call you Dodgeball Ron out there. And he's right here. I think you better come out and speak. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell? This guy's in Pennsylvania. He goes to the rehab. He speaks at the rehab. So at that point, I figured God is like telling me, this is no joke, okay? You got to come out to Doylestown and speak. So that's how Ron got me out here. And it's really, actually, I feel great being here. I'm happy to be here. My first sponsor, Chris S., has been out here, and he's told me it's a great group. He was real. I had breakfast with him this morning. I actually, at my home group, I celebrated this morning at 9 o'clock, and we had a celebration meeting. I celebrated 20 years. And I went out to breakfast with Chris, and he goes, oh, yeah, and you got to put a suit and tie on tonight. And I go, like, whoa, now we're really talking. It's going to be like 100 degrees out. What is this, like a penalty? So anyway, I suited up and showed up. So, I think I'm going to start where I sometimes start when I tell my story. I'm not going to give you a lot of my background. I'm going to jump right into an example of growing up, but I really want to put it in the context of powerlessness. I kind of want to demonstrate sort of like a first step experience that I had in high school. And looking back, I can call it a first step experience. While I was there, it was nothing but a bad experience. But here's how it went. I was a sophomore, I think, as I remember playing my first varsity football game. And that was kind of a big deal. And so I went out with all the varsity players and maybe 30 or 40 people. And we're out deep into the woods, and there's a bonfire. I'm not kidding you. It's as big as, not that, but it's as big as that ceiling there. And there's a huge bonfire going, and everyone's partying. We'd won the football game. I'm 15 or whatever it was at the time. And I'm thinking, this is the coolest thing in the world, okay? And they start passing stuff around the bonfire. And there must be 30, 50 people passing stuff around. And everything's going around, all different kinds of alcohol, beer, other substances. It's going around, going around. And what happened was, and I'm reminded of this, I occasionally see some of my friends from high school, and they remind me of this. What happened was, I got this bottle, and don't ask me why it was this particular bottle, but I got a bottle of Cutty Sark. And I drank it. And it's being passed around. And as it's being passed around, I'm thinking, like, get that back, okay? I want that back. And I'm watching it go around, I'm watching it go around. I mean, I could almost picture it today, like it happened yesterday, you know? And I'm watching it go around. And then as it gets about halfway around, I'm thinking, this is taking too long. When it comes back, I'm keeping it, all right? I'm gonna keep that bottle. And when it came back, I did keep that bottle, and I drank the whole bottle. And the reason I say my friends remember it, they'll see me like at Christmas, a few of us from high school get together, and they'll go, oh, Rod, remember that Cutty Sark? Because here's what happened next. So I drank the whole bottle of Cutty Sark. Now, a couple of things about that as it relates to our first step, especially kind of as outlined in the doctor's opinion. I clearly had that craving. I clearly had that allergy. There was no doubt in my mind when that bottle was going away from me that I wanted it back. And there was no doubt in my mind that when I got it, I was going to keep it. And the obsession was, when it was halfway around, I knew I needed it. You know, so that allergy and obsession were clearly defined in that moment for me, looking back on it. But that night sort of changed a lot about my teenage life. What's the smartest thing to go if you're completely falling down drunk? Go to the high school dance. Show up, right? So that you could look like a complete ass. And that's what I did. I got into a confrontation with a teacher. I'm told it was physical. I was in a blackout. I fell and did some damage to my face and had to have some reconstruction. I was thrown off the football team and thrown out of school. So that wasn't bad for my first drunk, right? That's like doing okay. Now here's what happened. So I had led a certain lifestyle. Like I was an athlete and I was hanging out with the athletes and they were my friends and I was on the football team and that was sort of a lifestyle. That was all taken away from me. Not to mention the fact, I won't even get into it, but what happened at my house when I got home that night was a nightmare. My brother talks about it sometimes. He said, you know, that you tried to attack mom and dad and they threw you on the floor. It was just bad. So they weren't talking to me either. There was just a whole complete family breakdown at that point. So what do you think I did? I went out and got new friends. All right? And when I tell you this, it sounds like it's a typical made-up story or something, but it's true from my experience. The very next weekend, what do you think I was doing? I was drinking with a new group of friends. All right? After all of that hell and that terror of that night, right? And my entire life being pulled out from under me, I found a new group of friends and I was drinking the next weekend. And I look back on that now and I can see clearly the allergy, the obsession outlined in there, and my life had already become unmanageable. Fast forward a little bit, I went to college. I ran into a little problem though. I came back into college my junior year and they said, well, it's great that you're back. You can start as a freshman. And I said, what do you mean I'm a freshman? I'm a junior. And they're going like, well, no, look at your transcript. And I had failed so many courses and taken so many, dropped out of so many classes. I didn't have enough credits to even be like I was a returning freshman, basically. So I had a resentment about that. And I said, I'm out of here. Of course, I waited till about 3 months into the semester, which meant we couldn't get my any refund on my tuition, which my father didn't talk to me for like another 6 months. And it was 1970, 71. And so those of you, there's a few of you out there in the audience who might remember this. There was a draft in 71. Remember this, guys? And they were still drafting us to go to Vietnam, and I was drafted. So the deal was, if you were in college, you were protected from the draft. as soon as you dropped out of college. And they got me like in days. It was amazing. Like, how do you know that? There was no internet or anything. And it's like as soon as I dropped out, boom, you're going into the Army. So they drafted me because I had okay, I'm always lucky. I get a good number. My draft number was 4, okay? That's not a good number in the draft, okay? So not only did I drop out of school, but they found me, but I was drafted into the Army. So I get drafted into the Army, and they gave me like 3 or 4 months off before my induction. It was a strange thing because that was at the height of, it was peaking, the Vietnam War. There was a lot going on, and so they were really struggling to get everybody into the Army. There's a lot of administrative stuff. So I did what most people were doing at that time in 1970, I guess it was actually 71. I got into a Volkswagen van with a couple of friends, and we had long hair, full beards, and we drove all over the country, basically supporting ourselves illicitly. So we were transporting substances all over the country as a job. So we were driving this Volkswagen van all over the country. And I get to Chicago, I'll never forget this, December of 71. And at that time, there was no internet, and so what they did is they put their announcements in the newspaper. I know you guys don't even know what newspapers are anymore because we're on the phones, but so the newspaper, they had headlines saying, Nixon announces de-escalation. Well, de-escalation meant that we were going to pull out of Vietnam, right? So I'm getting ready to go in. I'm already in the Army. I just need to go and get my, that's called induction. I was going to go to boot camp. So I'm technically in the Army. We're announcing they're cutting back the forces, and it says flip over the page, and they'll tell you what to do. Your instructions, depending on your number and depending on your date, will be on the back. And I got turned to the back page, and it said, don't come in. Basically, that was my instructions. Don't show up. Because they were bringing home like 50,000 troops, and they didn't have the administrative capacity to bring these people back and also bring more people in. And it was creating a bottleneck, so the best thing they could do was say, just don't come in. Just don't show up. And at first I thought it was a joke. Like, wait a minute. I'm in the Army. I mean, aren't they going to come find me? I'm going to be AWOL or something, right? And then it took them a couple of months to give me the paperwork to support that. But that's what happened. So now I'm a free spirit. I'm like a full-on hippie driving in a Volkswagen van. Let's just keep going, which is what we did. We kept going for a while. And there was a lot going on in my life. But never, never, never without alcohol. And my friends would always say to me, they'd say like, hey, we're already having some kind of fun. Why do you need to be drinking? And I always needed to drink because I felt like I could go back to that. I kind of knew how to work drinking to supplement or support whatever else I was doing to stay high at the time. So we traveled around the country for a while. Like I said, it was a crazy lifestyle. We lived in the van, and we were just in every state in the country. But in February of '72, we went down to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. And in 1972, we had some friends who were down there, including some really close friends of mine who I went to high school with and their sister. And we're partying at Mardi Gras, and that's where I met my wife. I've still been married to her for 46 years. And we met, I can only describe it to you this way. All I'm going to tell you is we were at Mardi Gras, okay? And that's, imagine the condition we were all in at the time, but we were in love. And so that was in February of '72. By December of '72, I had just turned 21, and we got married. Life was still completely crazy. There was just a lot of craziness going on in our house. We began to have kids right away. I was working construction. I was framing new houses, and business was booming, and I was a young guy who could frame pretty fast, and I was doing. I was pretty successful as a builder. But one of the problems with that is you don't have insurance, you don't have like a regular job, and I was beginning to have kids, and now I'm like in my well, no, I was only 22, I guess. So I was encouraged to get a real job. So I go to work for a company, a Fortune 500 company, as one of their lowest entry-level positions. Okay, it's the lowest position they could have. I was going into supermarkets and retail stores, picking up damaged goods, packing it up, and sending it back to the factory, basically operating. They called me a salesman, but I didn't sell anything. It was just basically cleaning up, right? And I was drinking like crazy because what happened was So now I'm young, I'm in business, and I'm wearing a suit and tie anyway, or at least I'm in corporate life. And guess what? These guys drink pretty hard. I thought I was drinking pretty hard on the construction site. Guess what? These guys at lunchtime, they're pounding down martinis and scotches and vodkas, and then after work we're going out and not going home till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. I liked it. This is good. I can relate to this. So what happened was I found a guy who was my mentor, and I drank with him for a couple of years, and he would tell me to go to all these different places and do stuff. I did whatever he did, whatever he said. And I drank with him insanely. I mean, we would go up to North Jersey several times. I was coming down the Garden State Parkway, and again, those of you who are old enough to remember this, before the cops were the way they are now, I would just pull over on the side of the Garden State Parkway and pass out. My wife didn't know where I was, and a couple of times she sent the cops out to get me, and they found me on the parkway. They didn't arrest me back then. It was a whole different, like they knock on the window saying, "You better go home," you know. And I'm like, oh. And one time they did it, and I was on the inside lane, parked on the inside. Oh, that's crazy. So he's teaching me to drink, and he gives me a promotion. He gives me a better job, right? Oh, now I'm going to be like a regular salesman. Now, don't forget, I had no college education. Other than those couple of years I had really doing nothing, right? So he promotes me. Next thing I know, I'm going to be a salesman. Well, I found another guy, my next boss. Guess what? He liked to drink. I could drink with him. And he was a scotch drinker. And he actually said to me, he goes, "Kid, I got a lot to teach you. One of the things I'm going to teach you is how to drink scotch." I think, like, what a great job. So he proceeds to teach me, you know, kind of the ropes of selling this product. And one thing leads to another. I get promoted. Guess who my next boss was? The regional sales manager. They like to drink. I'm like, this is great. And it continued like that. For some reason, I was attracted to, or they were attracted to me. Like, you know what? He's a kid. We're going to teach him. And one of the things we're going to do is drink with him. And that went on for enough years where, believe it or not, the short story of that is 13 years later, I was national sales manager of this Fortune 500 company. And I'm actually flying around on private planes, checking things out, okay? And here's the problem with that. I didn't know about it until I got to the fourth column of my fourth step, and we'll talk about that real quickly now. But I was so full of fear that my drinking accelerated to a near suicidal pace. Why was I full of fear? Because I was afraid I was going to be found out. Because there was no internet, I kind of lied on my resume, and he couldn't check. I said I had a college degree. And then when I got a different job, and I could tell that other people were going to be a more sophisticated job, and I was going to have a lot of marketing responsibilities, I kind of told them I had a master's degree. So I was doing better in education, you know, as my jobs progressed. But the lies are getting deeper too, right? So I'm thinking like, wow, everything seems great. I'm making a lot of money. I'm successful. But if they ever find out, they're going to fire me. And as soon as they fire me, the next guys won't hire me because they'll find out why I got fired. That I lied on my and I couldn't take it back because it was all paperwork was already in file. It's all with these different human resource people. The lies are just they're there. I can't get them back. So I was in constant fear that I'm going to be found out. And as a consequence of that, I looked like I was doing a good job. I was showing up and looking good, but I was constantly in fear. So the way I made up for that was two things. One is I worked harder than anybody else. I'd work every Saturday and Sunday. And I was a complete jerk at home. I was angry. In fact, I'll talk to you more about this later, but one of my daughter's best friends, when I had about 10 years sober, she's over at the house with her fiance, and she says, her fiance, I could hear her talking. I was almost a few feet away. He says, I see Mr. B doesn't drink. What's the story with that? And she goes, I don't know about the drinking, but he had an anger problem. Okay, so my anger problem was so bad that the people around me responded to that as my problem even more than my drinking, which was completely out of control. I mean, when I say out of control, I'm going to go through my drunken log, but I can tell you about the cars I totaled, 3 of which were company cars, which required, well, I'll tell one story about that. And so I'm living in fear. I'm drinking at an accelerated level. There were some incidents, a big sales meeting where I was completely drunk. They found me in the men's room laying in my own vomit. which I probably could have got away with because some of the other associates tried to get me onto the bus to go back to the hotel, and they were trying to hide it. But when I threw up on the bus, you can't hide that too good, you know what I mean? Like, you never want to throw up on a bus. It's kind of like not a good thing. So human resources got a wind of that. Someone stuck up for me. They ended up not sending me to rehab at that point. But my career at that company was becoming more complicated. More complicated. And so I knew a new job was probably gonna happen. But before I left that job, I will tell this one story. I'm with one of my business associates. We're out drinking. We'd gone to a business function. We went to a bar, and we closed the bar at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. We were completely out of our minds. I'm driving home. Oh, wait a minute. Let me back this up. So where was I going? I was coming back east from Chicago. I'd been living in Chicago, and we're having our house, this new house that we had bought, we're having it redone. So I'm living with my in-laws. So I'm staying at my in-laws' house. Okay, picture this now. You got to get this. So I'm at my in-laws' house with my wife and at that time 2 kids, and that's where we're living temporarily. So we drive home from this bar, and he follows me. He follows me. He goes, I think you're drunk. Well, he was so drunk, he's following me. So he's following me, and later on, a few days later, he told me, he goes, you hit this big retaining wall, like a 12-foot retaining wall, and it was one of the ones that had, like, it was concrete, but it had, like, rocks built into it, like, decoratively. And he goes, you were just bouncing off, bouncing off, bouncing off. So when I got to my in-laws' house, all the tires on the passenger side were completely off the wheels, like they were just flopping around. All the glass was gone on the passenger side, and the doors were just caved in. So I pull into my in-laws' house. Hi. And I'm in a blackout, you know. So what happens was, I don't remember anything about the night. So I wake up the next morning, and I come downstairs, and I'm sure this has never happened to anybody, but you get in, and there's a bunch of people downstairs. My mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my wife, I think my sister-in-law was there. And maybe some of you had this experience where you're in a blackout, and you're trying to get information. Like, you guys seem pretty pissed off. What happened last night? Don't you know? Oh yeah, of course I know. In reference to what? You know, you're trying to get, like, can you give me a hint? And they said, well, don't you remember you drove that car in? And it's still sitting out there in the driveway. And, you know, it starts to come back to you. And I'm like, yeah, car. And I said, yeah, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble about that. And my wife goes, you're not in trouble because of the car. I'm like, whoa. Well, then what else could this be? So she goes, don't you remember anything? And I said, no. And she goes, well, the car isn't why we're all upset. She said, don't you remember getting up at around 4 o'clock in the morning, coming downstairs to look at the damage? And you were yelling and screaming. You woke everybody in the house up. And you went outside into they have a big yard as big as this, and it's got the motion detector floodlights. So now at 4 o'clock, the whole area is floodlit. She goes, all the neighbors were hanging out their windows, wanted to know what was going on, and they're hearing you yell, and you're walking around surveying the damage. And I said, well, that sounds really bad. She goes, well, how about the fact that you were naked? So that was another company car. But I tell you that story because it's representative of how crazy my life had become. And, like, you know, look, here's the point in telling a story like that. Do you think I stopped drinking? No. Do you think I was embarrassed enough to, like, oh my gosh, like, you know, make amends to my in-laws and change my lifestyle? No. Like, my life went on. That was a day in the life. And I wish that they were all funny, because they weren't, because they did, you know, I had an experience too where I was driving, and I had my 8-year-old and 10-year-old in the car, and I thought I needed to pull over, and I pulled over and basically passed out, and we were on Route 80, and it took a while for them to get some help, and anyway, my point is, there's experiences that weren't so funny, all right? And there was experiences with my family where I was falling in the house and was injured at one point with only my kids home. My wife wasn't home, and the EMTs had to come. And the EMTs came, and my kids were like, I don't know, at that time, 10 and 12. And they even said, oh, what happened? They said, oh, they said you weren't hurt. They said you were drunk. Because I was bleeding, I had fallen, I'd cut myself pretty seriously. And so they had to witness that and experience that. And at that time, at that point, the level of inconsiderate behavior on my part with my family was out of control as well. There was one thing that was really important in my life, and that was me. All right? The idea that the big book outlines that our root of our troubles is self-centeredness was so rampant in my life, and I had no visibility of it. I didn't see it. I didn't see the self-centeredness, nor did I see the associated fear that underlies all of that self-centeredness. So I'll just say this: that's the way my life was. And it continued like that. I was drinking every night. I was drinking all the time. I was drinking on the road on business trips and in blackouts and, getting in some trouble that way. I went to one meeting and a client came out to the parking lot afterwards, and I was in a very senior position. And I was so hungover at that meeting, I was reeking. I'd been up till like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the night before drinking. And he came out to the parking lot. And I had one of my associates drive because I couldn't drive. And he knocked on a window and he said to me, he said, "Don't you ever come back here. Don't you ever come back here." That was an embarrassment. This whole meeting was an embarrassment. You were like a physical embarrassment in there. You were sweating profusely. We could smell the alcohol from across and it was a huge customer, okay? Huge customer. So my life was just proceeded to follow this crazy course of drinking insanely and being gripped by fear and insecurity that I wasn't aware of. I never intended to come into AA. That wasn't my plan. Okay, at one point, after one really embarrassing incident at work, and at that point I was running a company. I actually was running a company. I realized I had to make a change, and I stopped drinking for a period of time. It might have been 6 months, but it was horrible. It was horrible. Anybody try to stop drinking without going to AA or steps or anything? I mean, that's worse than drinking. That's a terrible life. And that was the best I could do. So we moved back to Jersey again, and now I have a very senior job. I'm running another company. And in February of 1998, my oldest son went into rehab. He had a drug problem. And at the same time, my daughter was in therapy and actually she was really seriously emotionally disturbed and was at risk. And so she was seeing a therapist, and our family life at home with my wife was crazy. I'm drinking every night and coming home at 2 o'clock in the morning. My sister-in-law finally said, she came to visit one time and she goes, "Ron, you know what your problem is? Here's the kind of person you are. You're a Wednesday night blackout drinker." And she's looking at me, and I knew exactly what she meant. I didn't need a weekend. I didn't need an event. I didn't need an excuse. It's Wednesday, okay? And she said, "I've watched you. You come home, you're already drunk, and you sit down for dinner, and you have more to drink, and then you have." She goes, "I watch you go right into a blackout. You're a Wednesday night blackout drinker." I'll never forget that label. So my son's in rehab. February 1998, and I'm still drinking. And as soon as he goes in, they tell us, we go to a parents' thing, and they tell us, "You're going to have to stop drinking. And you're going to have to clear all the alcohol out of your house. If he's going to come home to live with you guys, he needs a sober, safe environment." So we took the alcohol out of the house, but I couldn't stop drinking. I could not stop drinking. From February of 1998 to June of 1998, I could not stop drinking. All right? Also in the doctor's opinion, it talks about our mind has no control at all over our body. Right? That my mind had no control. I would say, "I'm going to stop tomorrow." By 4 o'clock, I'm drinking again. I'd say, "I'm going to go to an AA meeting." I went to an AA meeting. 2 days later, I'm drinking. I swore to my wife I'd stop drinking. I asked her one time, I said, "How many times do you think I promised you I'd stop drinking?" I'm hoping she's not going to say more than 10. And she says, "Hundreds." I said, "No, I mean really." She says, "Hundreds." It became like a regular thing. So, but I couldn't stay sober. I could not stay sober. And so now he comes home, and I'm drinking and coming home in blackouts. We don't have any alcohol in the house, but I'm sneaking alcohol in, sneaking in bottles, drinking outside, coming home, drinking, falling down drunk. In particular, Mother's Day of 1998, that was May, was a real bad blackout drunk for me. I started with Bloody Marys in the morning, proceeded to what my kids used to call pinkies. because by then the amount of tomato juice was just like pink. And then I would go right to straight vodka. So it would start with a bright red tomato juice and proceed to what they call pinkies. And, oh, Dad's he's up to pink now. And then it would just be clear, okay? So that was a typical Mother's Day. And I've never heard the exact story, but apparently it was really bad. And my life was starting to come down on me. So my son was home during this time, and not surprisingly, under those conditions, he relapsed. So he relapses, he goes back to the same rehab that he'd been at, and now he's doing an IOP, an intensive IOP there, after having relapsed. And we get a call, and the call says, we think the whole family should come down to discuss his relapse and what his new course of treatment is going to include. And I'm like, yeah, good. He relapsed. He needs a little jump start, And so I get there, and there's a circle, what there always is in these situations, and there's family members there, and there's several counselors there. One I didn't recognize, like, this is a strange setup. And they talk to my son for like 30 seconds, and then they all turn to Ron, and they're going like, but, the real problem is you can't stop drinking, and you're the atmosphere that he's living in. What are you going to do about it? And I'm like, I'm just like, what is this, an intervention? You're crazy. What do you expect me to go to rehab? But what's going to happen? And they start doing exactly like, like an intervention. They want me to go to rehab right straight from there. You don't need luggage. You don't need anything. And you have to go. You're so terrible. Your son's not safe. So I don't really remember the details because it was a blur. Like, wow, I thought we came down to talk about my son. And they're saying a lot of bad things about me. So I do remember that. And so then this one woman, counselor, I'll never forget, she gets up from across the circle and she comes walking at me. Now, guess what I want to say to her? Like, what? You can get up. I can't get up out of this chair. You're going to come and get in my face? I really wanted to, before she even opened her mouth, let her have it. So she comes over, and what had happened is just before she got up, the idea that it might not be a good idea for my son to be living at home. Let's just forget it. This guy's he's not getting it. We're not getting anywhere here. For the safety of your son, let's pull him out of the house. There's a halfway house in Princeton, New Jersey. We'll put him there. And they'd apparently been discussing this. I don't really remember it because I wasn't paying attention, but I could kind of hear this, like, oh yeah, we'll put him in Princeton. And so that was the discussion. We'll take him out of the house and put him in Princeton if he can't stop drinking. Because it's not safe. Which also, those code words mean if this continues, there might be a typhus thing, whatever. So the woman gets up, comes across, and she says, I know exactly what you're thinking. Now, if I was angry when she stood up and angry when she came over, I was furious when she said that. She says, I know exactly what you're thinking. I'm going like, you have no clue what I'm thinking. She said, here's what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's a pretty good idea. Send him to Princeton. He'll be out of my house. I can drink as much as I want, and I won't have to deal with you people ever again, because I'm not coming back here. And I'm embarrassed to be talking about like this, but that's exactly what I was thinking, okay? I mean, almost to the word, right? But it sounded better in my head, okay? In my head, it sounded like I'm really going to do the right thing for him. Like, this will be good for him. But really, what I wanted to do was drink. And I knew if they sent him to the halfway house, they couldn't do anything to me. I could drink. Now I could bring liquor back in the house. I mean, I was exactly what I was thinking. But when she told me what I had done, where I was going, I freaked out because what she had really taught me through explaining to me my own thinking was, you're willing to give up your son so you can stop drinking. You don't really care about his health, his well-being, his state of mind. You want to drink. That's more important. And at the time, it was. And I haven't had a drink since. Now, it wasn't because of that threat, but it's because of what happened next. I didn't go to rehab, but what they said is, we're going to check on you every day. You have to call. For my son to go back into their program, I had to call them every night. So I would call them every night and tell them I went to a meeting, who I met, where I was. I had to check in and pay them, okay? So now I'm paying my son's counselor so they can monitor his father. It was another crazy situation. So So that's how I got into AA. So that's what it was like. So now I'm going to tell you about what happened. And I'm going to put it in this context because I celebrated 20 years. And a guy who I really respect, he's got 28 years sober. He said, listen, when you get your anniversary, when you're up in those higher years, you need to take some time and ask yourself, what kept you sober? How are you staying sober? You need to think about that. You need to reflect on that. You need to take your sobriety seriously. And I was like, okay. And he goes, no, I don't mean okay, like you're going to go home and think about it over a cup of coffee. I mean, I want you to think about it for a week. I want you to think about it for a week and come back and talk to me. So I did. And here's what happened. Over this last few weeks, I realized that there were 4 things that really have kept me sober in terms of here's what happened. And the first thing that happened is I went through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as outlined in the big book. That's not everybody's experience. That was mine. How did I get there? I was the guy I just described a minute ago. I wandered into a big book meeting. I didn't know a big book meeting from an open discussion meeting from a speaker. I didn't know what they were. I just happened to go into this meeting. It was a big book meeting. The guy that was there started to tell me, oh, you should do this, you should do that. I'm like, okay. You know. He goes, you're going to come to my house on Wednesday. I'm like, I'm not coming to your house. It's bad enough I'm in this basement. I'm not coming to your house. He goes, do you have a sponsor? I said, I lied. I said, oh yeah, I have a sponsor. And I don't need another sponsor. He goes, good, because I don't want to sponsor you. He said, but I will take you through the steps. And I said, oh, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go. Now, I had driven another guy to the meeting, the guy who was at the VA hospital. And he's in an institution. And they were allowed out of the VA dom at that time to attend meetings. So I'd go. One of the service things I did do is I'd go to the dom, pick him up from this hospital dormitory situation, a lockdown situation, and they were allowed to go out to meetings with me. So this guy Bob goes, oh, we'll go to your house. I want to go to Chris's house. I'm going, Bob, shut up. And he goes, no, let's go to his house. And on the ride home, he goes, it's going to be so great. I'll be able, you know, he's in an institution. He goes, we'll go to somebody's real house. I bet his wife's going to have pie, and there'll be a living room, you know, like a fire in the fireplace. He goes, I'll finally be out of an institution. I'm going like, you know what? Okay, fine. So we go there for like 3 weeks, and I have no recollection of what happened, and I didn't care, because all this guy was doing was talking, and all I remember is blah, 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 blah. Okay? But what happened was, over the next few days, kind of in those weeks, I hit a bottom in AA that was worse than my bottom outside of AA. I don't know if anybody's ever had that experience, but that bottom in AA included complete realization of what my life had been like. All right? Now I'm clear enough that the guilt, the remorse, the recognition of my family's dysfunction is becoming clearer and clearer, and I was a mess. I'd go to AA meetings and I'd cry. I mean, it got so bad. I remember going to one meeting and I raised my hand, and I can remember them all turning to look at me and going like, oh, he's going to cry again. You know, and I had to stop sharing. So Chris is there. I go to his house that night, and I remember thinking, and you know, I wish you all this experience because it's what mattered in my life more than anything else since then, up until then or since then. And that is, I completely surrendered. I'm sitting there in his house. I'm realizing my life is worse than ever, and I said, you know what I'm going to do? Whatever he says. I'll do anything he says. I don't think he's particularly smart, but you know, I'm going to do whatever he says, because I was arrogant. My current sponsor says, you know what I remember about you, Ron, is when you first came in, is you didn't know anything and you were particularly arrogant. I said, oh, how do those things go together? And so he told me, he goes, I said, well, what are we doing? He goes, you got a 4th step form in front of you. Start working. I said, what do you want me to do? And I started making notes, and here's what happened. I did anything he said. He took me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't sign up for it. I wasn't a big book thumper. I just fell into it. And this was all in my first maybe 6 months. I ended up there. All right? It wasn't a decision. I ended up there. Now I ended up at his house, and he's taking me through the steps for real. Okay? With some serious, specific instructions. I get to my 4th step, and I had my first spiritual awakening. All right? And, you know, I'm not talking about a religious experience. I'm not talking about a spiritual awakening some people might think of in terms of it being necessarily attached to a God moment. It was a flash, brilliant flash of reality. I became aware. I woke up. Spiritual awakening means you wake up. All right? You wake up to the reality of your life. Like what is true. And here's what was true for me. I go to put my wife on the resentment inventory. I go across Of course I'm mad at her. There's so many reasons. I could make a list, and then how does it affect me? Everything. My sex, my self-esteem, my pride, everything. That checklist, absolutely. My wife, wow, it's bad. So then he tells me before I can do my fourth column, I have to pray for her. And he shows me where the prayer is. And he makes me pray for everybody. I had 32 people on my resentment list. He said, you pray for each one of them before you cross that line between the third column and the fourth column. And by the time you get over there, you might see things differently. And when I got over to that fourth column, it's an example. I'm just going to give you a few examples. My example was my wife. I'm really angry at her, right? You want to know what's really going on? I look at it really hard. And I had said that prayer. And I said to myself, well, maybe I'm afraid. And maybe I'm being selfish. That's what I said. Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe I'm being self-centered. And I looked a little harder. I'm doing some more writing. I said, well, maybe I'm afraid. And then it kind of wrote itself. I wrote, I'm afraid I'm not a good husband. And then I wrote, I'm afraid I don't know how to be a good husband. And what I learned, I got goosebumps now. What I learned by that experience in terms of seeing reality is, and I don't know about you guys out there, I'm just going to give you my own experience. You want to be an angry husband, all right? Look really deep and see if you know what you're doing, okay? Because in my case, I didn't know what I'm doing. And you know how I want to cover that up? Get angry. Tell your wife that you know what you're doing, she should shut up. Why? Because I don't know what I'm doing, okay? So I'm so insecure that I have to act angry and arrogant to cover it up, right? And I don't know what to do about it because the fear is I don't know how to be a good husband. Like that reality was like, well, this can't be right. So let me do my kids. So I did my kids. Oh, yeah, they're all in trouble too. They've all gotten arrested. They've all gotten lawyers' fees. They've gotten DUIs. Acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. And they're affecting everything in my life. Let's pray for my kids. Let's go to the fourth column. What am I afraid of? Well, maybe I'm being selfish, self-centered. What am I self-centered about? Well, maybe I got a fear. What's my fear? Well, maybe they're making me look bad. My fear is other people are looking at my kids and they're thinking, he's a crappy husband. He's a crappy father. Because now I'm really got a fear of what other people think of me. I got a fear of not knowing how to be a good parent or not being successful at being a good parent. I've got the fear that I have failed. All right? So I've got this fear of failure that's overwhelming me. You want to cover that up? Be angry. Yell at your kids. Tell them they should do better. Okay? Why do I want them to do better? Because it makes me look better. And I'm looking at this, I'm saying, really? This is how self-centered I am, driven by 100 forms of fear? And what I realized was, that's the truth. That is the truth. And it continued right on, all through work, right? I'm running this big company, and I got a chairman of the board, and I'm afraid of failing. And so what do? I constantly tell him he doesn't know what he's doing. He's got to listen to me. Why? Because if I ever admit to him that he's right, what does that mean about me? I'm wrong. I can't be wrong, because if they find out I'm wrong, they're going to find out everything. All right? So now I'm afraid of what's really going on at work. And what I found out is what's on in our third step in the big book. It says, our root of all our troubles is our selfishness, our self-centeredness, driven by, is it 100 or 1,000? I think it's 1,000. Forms of fear. Probably says 100. I got to exaggerate everything. So, that was my problem. I discovered, so my spiritual awakening is, I discovered my problem. Whoa, there it is. And I called up Chris at the time. He was married to someone else who was in the program. So I called, Chris isn't home. There's no cell phones back then. And I called her up, and Mary Beth answers the phone. Chris isn't home. Oh, that's okay. I need to talk to you for a few minutes. And she's in the program. What? I said, I've discovered the root of my problem. And Mary Beth goes, well, that's very nice, but Chris isn't here. I got to tell you what happened. I did 32 of these. Listen, here's how the first one went. I had her on the phone for half an hour. I had her hostage. And she goes, Ron, I really can't do this. You have to talk to Chris. But the point I'm making is it was like an amazing, amazing spiritual experience. What's my problem? Self-centered fear. It wasn't the alcohol. It wasn't all the rest of the stuff I did. It was the spiritual malady of self-centered fear. All right? And I ran down those 32. Then I did a fear inventory and really understood my fears. And then I was told to go do amends. After a great fifth step and a great sixth step, he's told me everything's going to be okay. I'm like, cool. Then he tells me I got to go make amends to all these people. That was not cool. And before the first year was up, because I didn't want to go back to where I was, I did all 32 of those amends, including one that I said I would never, ever do. It was someone who'd harmed a member of my family physically, and she was assaulted, and he was found guilty, and he was tried and prosecuted, and I had kind of gotten into a little physical altercation with him and had a restraining order on me, something like that. And I actually ended up, it was my last amends, and I did it. You know why? Not because I was going to condone or enable his behavior, because I no longer wanted to live with the spirit of vengeance and hate. All right? I needed to let go of that. You know, forgiveness comes from a Greek word, letting go. That's why in the Bible it says, forgive your debts. It means let go of the debts. I'm not going to collect. Right? So forgiveness means letting go. It doesn't mean approving. I don't need to approve of what you did. I can forgive you by simply letting go of the fears and the hate that I have that's attached to it, which is what I did. I went through all those amends, including to my in-laws and my family and work. I mean, I actually went to the chairman of our company and made an amends. It didn't go over big because I had to tell him that I'd kind of undermined his leadership. I didn't go over big. Anyway, but I did it. I did all these amends. So the first thing that's kept me sober is doing the steps of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as outlined in the big book. The second thing that's kept me sober is developing a network of men and women who I've been friends with for the last 20 years. And these men and women are keeping me sober on a constant basis. They're not necessarily my sponsors, but I talk to them, I see them, there's two men I see every single week. We have coffee. We don't go to the same home group, but we find a way to get together and have coffee every week. They've been with me for 20 years. My daughter went through a horrible custody battle where her daughter was basically kidnapped by the ex, and it's a whole long story. But I couldn't attend the court hearing because I was a witness, and witnesses aren't allowed into the court. So one of these friends I'm talking about right now, he's an attorney. He took off of work every time we went to court. I think we went 4 times. He took off of his job. He came to the courthouse. He talked to my wife and I, and he went in and sat next to her at every hearing. And he explained to her what was going on, and he held her hand, and he helped her understand what was going on. So I had to sit out in the lobby area, right? But that's the kind of friends I'm talking about. They show up. They help take care of you. They're part of your personal life. Another one, he went through a divorce, and the first night he left his house, he had nowhere to go. He slept at our house for a couple of days. I mean, that's the kind of friendships I'm talking about. So the second thing was developing this relationship with other men and women. The third thing that's kept me sober is working with others. I currently have 10 sponsees. I take them all through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We do the 12 steps. I push them to complete their amends, not to start their amends, but to complete their amends. So we try to really move through that. I've had some sponsees as long as 18 years, 12 years, 15 years. Some are new. Some are coming and going. Some guys just come to me to do the steps. They say, I have a sponsor, but my sponsor said, I might need a tune-up. Could you take me through the steps? So on a good year, like last year, I heard of 5 fifth steps. This year, I've heard 3 already. So working with others is important. But not just working with others as sponsees. I continue to work with my sponsor. All right? I did another inventory just 2 years ago. I've done 5 inventories since my first one. You know why? Because I'm screwed up, okay? You know, I told you the story about my inventory. You think that made me like a perfect guy? No, all right? Especially if my wife is here, she'll tell you. So I got to keep at it. I got to keep working with my sponsor. And the last time I went through the inventory, you know what he did to me? Here's my new sponsor. I've had him 9 years. The first one I had 11. He says, he takes my inventory. And I just described to you how, you know, my experience of working with a lot of guys. I'm pretty smart, right? He looks at my inventory, goes through it all. He goes, you're not done. Throws it back at me. I'm like, what? Don't you know who I am? And he goes, no, you're not done. There's a name that you didn't put on there. And I said, who's that? He goes, it's your daughter. My daughter's got 4 years sober now. She actually lived here in Doylestown. I took her to meetings out here. She worked at Chambers for a long time. After 7 years of trying, she's been sober 4 years. And so he goes, you know, Amanda's not on the list. I said, I don't have any resentments about her. I'm so happy that she's sober. She's living at our house. She's living with us. Everything's great. He goes, really? Do you ever listen to yourself talk? He said. He goes, you keep saying like, oh, she's still at the house. Oh, she's not following the program I think she'd be following. You constantly have an attitude or an opinion of how her sobriety should unfold. And I'm like, oh, I do? And he said, you better do some work on this. He sent me back. I did that inventory over again. And when I was done with that inventory, I came back. We laid out some amends. I've made amends with all family members again and some other people actually in the program. So I work with others, but I continue to work with my sponsor. That relationship is really important for me to keep me accountable, to keep me honest. The last thing I'm going to say is this. So I worked the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I developed a network of men and women who help keep me sober and have become my dear friends. And I work with others. All right? The last thing is, I know this isn't true for everybody, but I'll tell you what happened to me. I found a way to rebuild my family. Sometimes alcoholism breaks us up and you can't get it back together. In my case, I'd been married to my wife at that point for 25 years. I awakened, and I realized I was with the woman I loved. I wanted to stay with her. I needed to work at it. I had to really work at it. I realized that my kids had been damaged, and the one who actually got me sober still isn't sober. The one who was in rehab, the older son, although he's at our house this weekend. But my daughter's sober, and so, I needed to work at rebuilding the family, and I had to look at what could I do, what was my role. Not to take over their role, but what was my role. So rebuilding the family was a huge effort and a focus on my part. When I made amends to my wife, and I'll just tell the women in this room might be able to relate to this, so I was the kind of guy I described. I was angry all the time. I was telling my wife, no, you don't know how to do it. I know how to do it. No, you know what? You got to do it my way. And here's the worst part. She's a small woman. Although she uses the expression, though she be small, she is fierce. It's a Shakespeare quote. She's got it on a T-shirt. And she is fierce. But at the time, I realized I had been so overpowering, and I'm a pretty big guy physically, right? So when I yell and scream and she's tiny, that's abusive. All right? I'm just going to speak from my own experience. I'm not trying to tell anybody else how to run their lives. I realized that I was abusive. And that abuse had created really emotional problems for her at that point, because I was constantly berating her. I was constantly putting her in, and I went to make amends to her. What I told her was this: you know what? I'm not going to make amends for all the harms. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but here's what I think happened. I think I've put you in a position of constantly feeling less than. And she cried, and she said, I had began at some point to actually physically feel smaller, like I was disappearing. And that's what an abusive relationship could do. So since then, we've got an entirely different kind of relationship. We're partners. One of the great things about our relationship is we constantly use the reference point of partners. And so every anniversary card, every birthday card, every Valentine's card has to have the word partner in it. Like we hunt for a card that mentions the word partner. And here's the great news for me. Now that there's been more gender diversification and there's different couples, the term partner is used all the time. So now I could go to the drugstore whenever I want and find a partner's card, and it's working out great for me. So we're partners, and she has taken on a super large role in our life. My kids said that she always was the most important parent. Anyway, nice kids, and we have a totally different life today. So my daughter's got 4 years sober with her daughter. She lives in the house with my wife and I. So there's 3 generations of women, including 2 alcoholics and myself. Wow, that's great. We call ourselves the unit. I have other kids and other grandkids, but this is the current unit that I live in and with. And so that's what's kept me sober. Going through the steps, developing a network, working with others, and rebuilding my family. And I'll say this. This morning, I went to my home group at 9 o'clock. I celebrated 20 years. They have a celebration meeting. My wife was there. My daughter was there. All the friends I mentioned to you were there. We went out to breakfast afterwards. And then I got a chance to come here. So this wasn't actually on my plan, but Ron talked me into it. And I'm so happy I made it here. The last thing I'll leave you with is this. I know it's an overused term, but I'm going to use it anyway. From the life I described earlier to the life I have now with my family and my friends, and the joys that I have in my life, I am truly a grateful alcoholic. I actually gave up corporate life, and 7 years ago I went to work for a not-for-profit. I'm a kitchen coordinator at a community soup kitchen in Morristown. So I cook for, we do about 75 people's breakfast and 150 lunches, and that's my job. I went from a corporate life to cooking food and washing dishes, and I've been doing it for 7 years. And it's the best job I ever had. And my family's back, and I'm feeling like God's put me in the right place. When I drove here tonight, Ron, I had this sense driving here that everything is going to be all right. Everything is exactly where it is, where it's supposed to be. And when I get up there tonight, that's where I'm supposed to be. And so when I have that sense of God consciousness, you know, and I didn't get a chance to tell you the more important story, which is I came in here an atheist, and then everything I told you about my spiritual awakening led me to a relationship with a higher power that underlies and underscores everything I do. Everything I do. Today I live in 10, 11, and 12. I'm a big believer in meditation. I mean, everyone can do what they want. I do a formal meditation every day, and it's a big part of my spiritual life. And lastly, I feel deeply rooted in step 12. You know, step 12 tells us, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. It doesn't say, like, if you had a awakening. It doesn't say, oh, you might have. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. That's my experience. Having gone through the steps, I had a spiritual awakening. I'm allowed now to bring that program to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all my affairs. And I encourage anybody to give it a shot, because you know what? There's nothing I can teach you tonight. There's nothing for you to learn. The only thing that happens in the steps is you experience them. So your experience could be entirely different than mine. But I encourage you to have that experience. Thanks for letting me be here tonight.
Thank you, Ron. It's customary for us to form a line and formally thank our speakers in person. They come here to travel here at their own time and expense. So let's one more time. Thank you, sir. Next week we have another treat for you. We got Harlan Kay out of Maryland. We like to call him the official tattoo artist of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. It'll be fun and epic. We're going over to Perkins afterwards. You're all invited if you like to come, half off appetizers. I still don't get a cut of that. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, we got to leave. If you want to do a little service, we got to leave 7 rows deep, 5 across. And if you care to join us, we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. And thanks for coming out. Help us these